scoreboard. So you're actually de-incentivizing leagues to use the city facilities. So I heard the comment that it's only going to be a $2 increase for football. And I heard the comment during the workshop that it's about a 35% increase across the board. When you factor in the Connex box rental space, which the football league has 3 of them, that's $3,600 a year. That's a new cost, okay? That alone is a 274% increase to the league costs. So last year, the league had 146 participants at $9 per athlete, so they paid $1,314. Now just the storage fee, which really is not a cost recovery because there is no cost incurred to the city for that. So there's no cost recovery. It's just a new fee. That's $3,600 annually. That's a 274% increase. Then you add the $100 annually for the snack bar, which is also new and completely understandable, right? That is a cost recovery. I get that. But that's a 282% increase. And that's all before we add the new rental fees. So if we had 8 home games last year at 8 hours, we're looking at realistically a 308% increase from the previous year, which is an increase of $25 per participant, not $2 per participant. And that's going to be true for soccer as well because they have Connex boxes out there. That's a new cost to them. They've never had that. So it's not a $2 per year increase. It's a $25 per athlete per increase. And there's no cost recovery to that. This is just an agreement that's been long in place with the city and the leagues that they could have these Connex boxes out there. And so it's a new cost. So what constitutes the need for crew members? So if one of the leagues has to call the duty line because one of the toilets at Fort Nugent is overflowing on a Saturday, do they incur a crew member cost?
No, that would be normal. That's a normal call out. That would be, the crew costs would be if you wanted help cleaning up after your tournament, if you wanted us to line the fields, anything above and beyond that you specifically request is that is whenever that new fee would come on. If you couldn't line your fields and you asked us to line your fields, then we would go out there, line your fields at that rate.
Okay.
And here's an example of we'll have to sit down with you and go through the rates. We can put a table like this together and calculate it out to show you exactly what that increase would be where. But like for soccer, cost per hour times number of fields, hours used per field, number of weeks. Here's their total, including the container charge per month. So their increase is about 36%, going from 7,600 to 10,000.
Okay, well, I did the math for football. It's a 308% increase. Why are the court rates so low compared to what's being proposed for the field usage? And then I don't see a resident and non-resident rate for the courts as there are for the fields. We're looking at spending $1 million to build pickleball courts, but we're going to charge $5 to use a court.
Yeah, those are not for like a organizational program, right? It's just for reservation of the courts.
But it says league rates.
Underneath that, the pickleball courts. Right now we don't have. I wanted to add those pickleball courts in there so that we didn't have to come back.
But
yes.
Cost recovery, we're going to spend $1 million and we're going to charge $5 per court.
Depends on what I'm doing about 1.2.
Okay. Times 8 courts. The $5 per court was based off of of the surrounding areas. We do not have a pickleball court in Oak Harbor, so that would be a starting point. It needs to be in the resident, in the non-resident rate.
What constitutes a special event that's not already covered by one of the previous listed fees? I mean, we kind of covered tournaments, we've covered clinics. What would be a special event that wouldn't be covered by one of those previous fees?
That would be my birthday party that I want to rent out a field. That would be considered a special event that
Is
would.
that already covered under resident and non-resident rates?
Yep. Yes.
So-
I guess I don't know. Understand your question?
Why do we have a special category for special events when we've already kind of covered all of those under resident, non-resident, league fees, tournaments, clinics?
Special events are for one-time events that have a certain amount of people over that max. We already have that established right now with our special event permits. So, if you're holding a festival in a park, that would be applied here. If it's a sports program that's running it, then that would apply to the field rental rates.
So is that on top of a special event permit? So you have to pay for the special event permit and then pay the special event prices for the field usage?
Yeah, I believe so, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that, again, de-incentivizes the idea that people want to come and have events here if they're going to have to pay an increased special event permit rate and then have to pay the field usage on top of that. I mean, I think either the event permit covers it or the field usage fee covers it, but you're basically double dipping in that sense. I mean, we've had free clinics out, or we had a few years ago, we had DJ Fluker come out. That was a free event. We brought people to the community. So now we have to pay. We don't charge for it. They explicitly do not allow us to charge for it. So to bring people to our community, we'd have to pay the special event fee and then pay for the field usage fee. There's no reason for us to do these things then and bring people to our community when it's going to cost us so much money.
Yeah. So the difference is that if it's a community event that's free to the public, right, then we don't charge for that field rental rate. If you want exclusive use to conduct a business activity where someone is paying a registration to participate, then that would trigger that field use.
Okay, so I think it's important that we specify that because it just the way you read it as a special event fee, right? You're just going to pay to have a special event there. It doesn't say, it doesn't designate whether you charge or not. It just says special event, right? So,
And I think that language is already in the special event permit on the website. If you go on there, that shows what fees are applicable depending on the type of event you're doing.
okay. So it's being proposed that we charge $111.05 per hour with a 2-hour minimum for an after-hour crew member, or $74.03 per hour during normal working hours, which only go up to 3 o'clock. But we'd only be charging $20 per hour for a site manager at the center during after-hours and weekends events. And why is that? Why is our other crew members worth $111 and our center staff is only worth $20?
Yeah, right. So for the center, we operate mostly off of volunteer staff at the center. Sometimes we have our part-time program staff that will be overseeing that. So it's a difference between a full-time, parks maintenance employee and someone that's already scheduled there either as volunteer or part-time program.
So you have volunteers that are working there in the evenings and on weekends? And they'd be the ones that would open this up for these events? Is there a 2-hour minimum as there is with the other crew members?
I believe. Yeah, just for the rental. Yeah.
Okay. So, again, it'll cost the public between $55.20 an hour to $69 an hour to rent the football field with a 2-hour minimum, but they can rent the entire center for just $40 per hour. If you rent the entire day, you're only paying $30 per hour. So how is that a cost recovery when there are additional costs incurred by the city to use the center, such as light and heat, that are not required for use of the football field?
Yeah, this was a discussion between finance and center staff. They wanted to keep the rental rates lower because of the types of programs that usually rent the center. We did do an incremental increase, but those, continue to stay lower than what you might find in the market, but it's still similar to what you would see in other senior centers. And that's pretty much standard in the industry. Outdoor fields rent at a higher rate than indoor facilities.
So our outdoor kitchen rents at significantly higher than the indoor kitchen at the center. I mean, why would we not just use the center then?
I think part of it's
You
demand,
could.
right?
You could, yeah, you're not gonna get the water and Windjammer Park. You absolutely could. If money was the option, then that would be the better option.
Okay. Where does revenue for the special event permits go? What fund does that go into?
Right now it goes to the general fund, and that would still remain the case, yeah.
Okay. And how do you classify events like the Challenge Series, the St. Patrick's Day Parade? Are those going to be charged the street closure rates?
Yeah, so like St. Patrick's Day, that'd be like a smaller event fee, so those fees are listed there.
What includes
And the closure is included.
the closure is $250. So the Challenge Series, because they close the road, would have to pay $250 to close the road.
Right.
These events don't make any money,
Right.
so they just okay.
But the city still incurs a cost to close the road.
So why can't we use the same logic that we use for like the field usage? If we're not charging, right? They're not charging anything.
Like for a special event.
Yeah, for like a special event. In the case where we have the football clinic, where we have somebody come in and we're not charging anything for it, and there's no fee for that. I understand the city's incurring a cost, but the organization that's putting it on is not making any money. I mean, I can see charging for where they have booth rental space, right? Music festival, Holland Happening, or whatever it's being called now, 4th of July. They have a cost recovery model. They have a way that they can recoup that cost that's being charged by the city. These other events don't have that, right? It is simply for the good of the community. And so where are they supposed to make that money in order to cover these costs?
Well, pretty much all special events incur a sponsorship to put it on, right? There's, whether it's through the chamber that receives money and funding from the city, or one of the smaller parades that either has a participation fee for the parade or gets a sponsorship for the parade.
St. Patrick's Day doesn't charge to be in the parade, and they charge like $25 a year for their membership, which doesn't even cover the cost of the insurance for the parade.
Which is why these were set much, much lower than I think what was originally proposed for anything that required a road closure.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to address the storage at the field, because I know that's something you have previously brought up. I'm just curious, I know the leagues have not been paying anything for that. Do you think that's a fair deal to have no fee for unsightly, large things that are taking up real estate in our parks? I'm just wondering what you would think a fair rate might be.
I do think it's fair, given that that's the rate agreement that has been in place for a long time. So had we known originally that we were going to be charged for that, I mean, we have already incurred the cost of purchasing that equipment. If we knew going in that we were going to be charged $3,600 annually for that, we probably would have found other arrangements. And since that wasn't done, we've already purchased them, they're already there, we incurred the cost of putting them there. Yeah, I think that's fair to not, if we want to do that moving forward, anybody that wants to put additional, or if we want to put additional Connex boxes out there knowing that that's the rate, okay. But since it's already been long established that these have been there, and that's the agreement that was in place, I think to go back and charge now is not the right move.
So I guess I'm just curious, because like with any contract, year over year, the contracts are updated. That's just the nature of business. Is that something that, like, let's say they do charge $100 per month per container, how does that impact your league? Are you saying you would pull your containers out of the park and find other arrangements then? Or I just want to know what that impact looks like.
It means we have to raise rates, which puts barriers to participation. And this whole organization, right, has been about getting more people outside and participating. We already have, we've been doing our absolute best to maintain our rates for as long as we possibly can and offer scholarships and do that. We'll have to raise rates. We'll have no choice. We can't absorb a 308% increase without raising rates, which puts limits to participation.
So I'm just curious, do you know that specifically how much that increases your rates per player?
I don't. That 308% increases our per player cost by $25 per player. When we are already at $225 with a early registration discount, $275 is our normal rate. So then we start looking at charging, a minimum of $300 in order to get people to play. It's already hard enough for people to come up with the money that they do. We do everything we can. We offer payment plans. We offer partial scholarships. There's the HIY scholarships, and we still have struggle with participation. So adding additional fees is going to put barriers to participation.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify
Yeah,
what that
understood.
specifically
Yeah.
looks
No, I'm
like.
happy to.
I think if we take a step back from the particularity of the football situation and look at this sort of globally, I mean, with almost all the problems that we face in recreation here, all have deals from the past that people had adjusted to that were using these things that, had a certain value. What happens, or what seems to be happening though, is everything, or a lot of the stuff that we have in recreation is no longer, I would say, meeting a standard, a reasonable standard, whether that's the albatross, that's the marina, whether that's the nature and condition of the fields that we offer for soccer, football, the fiasco we've had with baseball, knowing that softball needs field improvements, skate park's going to need upgraded. I guess what I'm saying is recreation is a little bit more like a haunted house than it is a home as far as facilities go, and we're going to feel a squeeze, and this is going to be difficult and contentious. And I'm not advocating for one side or the other necessarily, but I think we find ourselves in a situation that isn't good, and it's the result, I think, of neglect. And I don't want to, I'm not pointing out any necessarily individual, but maybe it's been a lacking vision and forethought, and we are now in a place where there's no easy answer, and we need to be able to have these conversations. I'm very concerned that this is going to go to council with next week, I think, right? Isn't that what we said? It's going to go to council
Correct.
next week. I feel like it's just still very undeveloped and unmatured. Having something on the books that allows us to have a better accounting of this stuff is great, and figuring out how we're going to track it. I'm just very concerned about the nature of how we do this across the board without, it seems to lack mutuality. We have self-interest, obviously. As a service provider myself, I have self-interest, and that makes sense. we also have the ins and outs and the particularities that Councilmember Marshall described of football and what they're trying to do in order to make the sport accessible. But yet we also have this reality of that everything is incredibly expensive and everything is struggling, I would say, to meet a competitive standard as far as what we would like to see and what would match similar communities and the communities in which our students and adults compete against or go and use facilities elsewhere. I don't know the answer to it, but I feel like this conversation is very indicative of a larger problem, and then we have to face it in some way if we're going to make changes, or we just, are going to have to go the other way and start eliminating services. And I don't think anybody really wants that, eliminating facilities. I don't think anybody wants that. I don't think we want to go into a complete sort of hands-off, completely passive recreation. I mean, that would make our parks derelict in no time at all. I don't know the answer, but I'm concerned that this is another one of those instances where we are compelled that we need to do something because we're faced with a real budget concern and some real problems, while having yet cast a greater global vision that's going to create the buy-in that we need in order to make these difficult changes that people will be less resistant about and more excited about, and making changes that make sense and are incremental, while also, though, calling all the users to acknowledge the state of which things are in and knowing that there's going to be some sacrifice, I think, in order to get where we need to go. But I don't know if the trust is built there yet in order to ease that transition, and that concerns me. Sorry for the filibuster.
I guess there's a disconnect between the city wanting the Parks and Recreation Department to recover all these costs. And as a council member, I just want to, where do you think the money should be coming from, if not from increasing costs to players? Like, as a council member, and you're approving the budget and you're on that end of it, what is your suggestion for recovering more of these costs?
So I don't have a problem with cost recovery. I think that's an important factor for what we're doing. But I think it needs to be equitable, right? So if baseball is absorbing $4, based upon Brandon's math, baseball is $4, soccer is $1, football is $2. Why are we going with a field hourly rate for the youth leagues as opposed to just charging more per athlete? And then so that way baseball's paying the same increase, football's paying the same increase, soccer's paying the same increase. And let's go after cost recovery things. There's no cost recovery to the Connex boxes. Those are there. They've been there. There's no maintenance done by the city. There's nothing that's done. So that's not a cost recovery. That's just a money grab, realistically, is what it is. I don't mind paying for the snack bar. We should be paying for that, right? There's electricity that goes into that. There are costs, true costs that go into that. So that's a cost recovery. Let's do that. But let's be cost recovery in all aspects. Let's not just say, well, we want to supplement the senior center, and so we're just going to glaze over that and not make them pay as much. If we're going to go cost recovery and we're going to charge organizations that don't make any money, then all of them go. All of them go up. And that includes the senior center. That includes their annual fees. That includes every single one, as opposed to, well, we're going to hit these ones, but we're not going to touch these ones. And I don't see that in this. It seems too varying. It seems too unequal. And it's not all cost recovery. It's just essentially just a grab, and so we went from $8.50 to $9. I don't have a problem with going up to, $12, $13, $14 per athlete, whatever the case may be, in order to cost recovery. But what are we getting in return for that cost recovery, right? Because in case of, let's just say, I have to speak football, right? Because that's just what I know best. What are we getting other than the grass being cut, right? What cost recovery are there? So we get the grass cut once a week. We're lining the fields. We're doing all that, the garbage cleanup. We own that scoreboard. We have to maintain that scoreboard. So what are we getting in return for these increased fees? And so anytime there's an increased level of cost, there's going to be an increased level of expectation of service, right? And so what are we getting in return for these additional fees as well, you know? So,
I hear that point, but let's just pick go drive through Jack in the Box and buy a value meal and spend $20. Are you getting any different food than you were 4 years ago when it was $10? No. And I think this is the challenge that we have is your point is right for like these services that we do for recreation programs. Like we should be seeing visible improvements to the standard and quality of the facilities. Also, the same ugly cheeseburger and fries is an ugly price, but it's increased, and the cost is increased. The dollars don't go as far, and so there's got to be something that works out there, some balance. And I know you've suggested some alternatives, but I think that's the economic reality in which we find ourselves. And you know this. I mean, you're a small business owner, right? You've seen all your costs increase all across the board, and yet you're turning out the same good work as you did before. But hopefully, you're passing that on to the customer, and there's some balance between the tax-paying customer, which is different than private business, and we have to figure out how to step and stage that. And I don't know, but we need to make some change somehow. I struggle seeing how it all fits inside a greater global strategy, but we're not afforded that time right now. I think we have to make some change. Just because the economic reality has put us at the $20 heart attack in a sack, that used to be $10, and that's the same with same fields, same bad drainage on the soccer fields down below, but it costs more. It costs more to even keep a park open, and that's the other thing is I think there's just a cost to a park existing now. The fact that yeah, you line it, you pay for the scoreboard, all that stuff, but the park exists, and the park exists because City of Oak Harbor Parks and Rec exist, and there's higher cost to that. So there's higher cost of its just inherent existence. I don't know. It's not an easy situation, but I think that's one change that is imminent or is absolutely necessary, is vital.
But I think what Eric is saying is that it's not even across the board. And that's where the discrepancy lies, is that one section is getting charged a lot more than another. And no offense to anybody, but these are kids. They deserve to be able to play and have it available to families versus renting out the center and having that be a lesser charge. So, that's where I think the problem is it's just not even across the board as far as the fees go.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I mean, I think finding a way in which that works is vitally important. I think one of the reasons that the senior center has been changed to the center was actually to activate the space in better ways that would provide a cost recovery model and doesn't have to see the it goes through phases, right? In the senior center, as you have an age and a generation passes away, and then you have to rebuild the thing. Whereas, in general, even though the birth rate is down, we still have children running through sports programs, and so we have activating the center in the way that we have should generate more revenue, and we do need to figure out in which way that's going to work. I wasn't speaking to the exclusion of that idea, just simply using it, making an analogy as far as costs have just increased and we have to do something about it.
I have my sprinkle of 2 cents. From what I'm hearing is, how I feel is it will probably never be equal, unfortunately, across the board. But what should be recognized are the fact that things do go up for families and for coaches. And I think that all of us here have volunteered at one time or another in our lives. And to not get paid to do something as a coach every day is really taxing on you, especially when you have to cover costs for the kids. A lot of times what I see as a coach are if the youth and families cannot afford the increase or just to play at all, we cover it ourselves. We get the equipment ourselves, and then we're there. So it's just an added stress which some stresses are good stresses and some stresses are, okay, we're on the verge of burnout, so we should probably take a step back. And also with sports, to play a devil's advocate, there are incentives. You know, if you're at the center, you're most likely not trying to win a championship, you know, sewing something. No offense to sewing. Sewing is a good stress reliever as well. But you're not really down there trying to, you know, make it to the top with your knitting. But I love knitting, no offense to knitting. So I know that there are certain incentives when the cost is there also, because it's like, okay, I've paid this much for you to play this sport. This is what we need to do. The lack, and I use lack very loosely because I'm not too familiar with what all we have as far as scholarships and sponsorships to support youth sports. I just know, and I feel, I don't know everything you feel, but I feel, you know, I understand that when the costs go up, it's times, yeah, it's the old burger and fries, and I get that part. It's just when a youth can't have that outlet, and the youth are the next in line to run the city. So when they don't have that outlet of mental health, it affects the whole entire household. And, you know, it could lead to so many things as far as abuse in the home or, you know, neglect in the home. Something as small as, oh, well, they're not playing football and now all this is happening, or they're not playing soccer or softball. But that's the truth of it. Like the statistics show that if there's not the outlet for the youth, even if it is knitting, if you take away from sports, it's very effective in a negative light. But for lack of time and me rambling on, my thoughts are, like you said, something definitely has to be done. There has to be a shift in something. I don't know where. I'm grateful for this conversation, though. I'm grateful that this has been birthed here today. And if this means more scholarship sponsorships or pulling from here and pulling from there and saying this is what we can do. And then when your comment was the 0.78 cents or 0.03 cents, if that can go somewhere that can affect this in a greater way, that would be amazing. So those are my 5 minutes of your life you're not getting back. Thank you.
So there are no standards or metrics or self-sufficiency goals or anything like that, which makes it appear to be arbitrary. I guess it's what are we trying to do big picture, and how much do we need the monetary input from all of these activities to make the Recreation Parks Department functional? My understanding is that there's a general fund, there's not a Parks and Recreation fund. Am I right or wrong on that?
Yeah, the Parks and Recreation budget is part of the general fund. We're not an enterprise fund. Like you said, we don't cover our costs by revenues. We have an administration that has a vision for what, you know, revenue projections should be, and have asked us to adjust fees to meet that. One way or another, we have to have some kind of support of the subsidy. No matter what, the department is going to subsidize all activities, right? Where that cost recovery or revenue support comes from is either through taxes or through user fees, right? And what that balance is, you know, is really up to the city. The recommendation on that, as you alluded to, usually comes from a cost recovery model that's part of our Parks and Recreation Master Plan. So we have funding from council to go and do that Parks and Recreation Master Plan, and we'll be doing that in 2025, which will have that model of these types of programs should pay this cost recovery percentage, right? And that's how we will set those in future budgets.
I mean, it seems like what we're trying to do is recover whatever we can recover to help the program.
Keeping in mind that there's been a history of paying at a certain level, and we don't want to you know, so exponentially increase that it's a sticker shock for programs.
So it's kind of like, what can the market bear?
Right.
As opposed to, what does it cost for an individual to dump the garbage or line the field or open the gate or whatever is required? I don't have a solution. I'm not making any recommendations. I'm just trying to look at a bigger picture. You know, ideally, there'd be enough money in the city budget that we could operate Parks and Recreation program, including fields and courts and everything else, without charging the customer, because we're here for that purpose, right?
I'd love that. I'm not in the business of, making a profit.
No, I understand. And I know you guys have done a ton of work, because I sat in on some of the conversations on trying to, and obviously you have, because we're coming down with $12.36 to try to justify a cost. But I just don't know where we're trying to get. I don't know what our overall goal for the city budget is, or for the Parks and Recreation Department is, and how far we can go without charging. I think we obviously should charge for leagues. Take Little League, for example, right? The property is city property. It's maintained by city funds. It's upgraded. It's, and all the things that go into that. So there'd be an expectation that there's going to be a charge to use those fields if you're a league. Not if you're going to go out with some friends and play baseball or football or frisbee or whatever it may be. Eric, we're going to have we already have a golf frisbee course, but we're going to have a better one, and it's going to be more competitive in nature. What is the expectation of that, specialty or that sport?
Yeah, that's a good question. So currently, right now, it's sort of, as far as Fort Nugent Park, it's a little bit Wild West. But in the other places that are more established, where I run events, I'm paying anywhere up to $400 a day to rent the access to the facility, and then with additional increases based on what facilities I open up, should they have any. So I pay for restroom usage, cleanings based on the amount of people. I provide my own insurance for those events, up to $2 million. Every vendor that I have on site has a charge for a fee, whether or not they're a food vendor or otherwise. Food vendors obviously have a higher charge, and then it's even more if they're not self-contained, meaning that there's power and water available to them. So, yeah, I mean, and I pass all that on to every entry fee that I take for every event.
And are these mostly or exclusively public venues?
Yeah, these are all, well, most of them are either owned by a county or
Yeah, so they're
some
all
munis-
taxpayer funded.
Yeah, there's a couple that are private, and then they have their own sets of fees, including like Deception Golf Center, where there's green fees and they're included in that, and then there's certain amenities that come along with that.
Okay,
place.
so then you as a user, and we expect the usage is going to go up significantly. You're looking for something, or what you're going to say, I want to use, Freedom Park. You're an outsider. I want to use Freedom Park for a tournament this weekend. You will be given, your expectation is that you'll be given a fee, $400 or whatever it may be.
Whatever it may be, yeah.
You're not going to sit down and negotiate how much time it takes for our people to do it, or empty the garbage or anything else. You're just given a number, and you can take it or leave it. Is that
Yeah,
right?
the number, I'm trusting that the number that's given to me is the number based on them doing their business calculations. They're offering me the price, and I'm purchasing the menu item.
And also based on what you're paying for other venues.
Correct, yeah, I have to make those decisions. And again, this would fall into the special event category. If I'm doing leagues, it's different typically, because just recurring revenue, for a facility. For a private facility, for a public facility, leagues are always a little murky, and a lot of those get treated informally, so there may or may not be a fee associated with them, depending on the agreement. A lot of times with those that have adopted the parks typically that are running them, but it varies from county to county and city to city.
Okay, I'm not really sure where I'm going with this, but it just seems like we ought to simplify this thing somehow. If you're a Little League and you want to use the 3 fields that we have, it's going to cost you so much for a season. And how we determine that number, I guess, is up to us. But you're right. Ideally, you'd like to be able to say, these are public facilities, you can use them, and the city budget can cover it. Wouldn't that be nice? But I don't think we're in that position. I think we have to recover some costs, but there's nothing telling me how much we have to recover. What do we need to make this reasonable? Or is it what the market will bear? Yeah. Go ahead.
So Tom, I'm glad you asked that question about the disc golf because what we're proposing for a tournament fee is $15 an hour, which seems way out of line compared to what you're currently paying, Eric, for a disc golf tournament. And we're investing a significant amount of money to build a new disc golf course at Freedom Park. Where's the cost recovery at $15 an hour? This doesn't seem like we are recovering our costs where our costs should be recovered in some of these instances. I mean, and another great question, what does it cost us to mow the field up at Fort Nugent? How much time, how much money does it cost us to cut that grass once a week for us to be charged then $34.50 an hour to use it? I don't see where the recovery model is. Well, what are our costs? How are we looking to recover those costs then, right? And I understand costs go up, and I'm not disputing that whatsoever. But we invested $165,000, $170,000 to fix up the baseball fields, but their costs are only going up by $4 a player, right? That investment has not been made into our other fields. So we are making a significant investment into one. Where's the cost recovery? How is that equitable then in terms of cost recovery? When one organization is only paying slightly more than the other organizations, yet they had a $170,000 investment in their facilities. So I'd like to see how we're really covering our costs, where these recoveries are coming from. It doesn't seem like we're recovering the costs that need to be recovered.
Yeah, and I think this is the nature of when we're sort of doing these Hail Mary fixes on stuff, because stuff has gotten to the point, right, where there's been no good measured strategy on maintenance for these things. And then it's like, all of a sudden, we've got a crisis, like for the baseball, right? It's unsafe now all of a sudden, and we can't play, and whether or not dues have been paid or anything else by said organizations. And then, so now we're just scrambling to fix it. Now we incur this big bill because it's always more expensive to be reactionary than it is, to be planning ahead and taking care of this stuff. And so, yeah, how do you get back that money? What do? Do you lump that all into them, or do we just say, well, this is the cost of doing crisis management? This kind of triage is so expensive, and that's why I've expressed, how does this all fit into some global, agenda that we're really trying to accomplish? Because then we can see how the puzzle pieces fit together, and we understand it's cooperative, at least up until some point, that we get everything to a reasonable standard. But it's not there, and that makes it even more difficult. And the city doesn't operate like a business, so they're not calculating, like a really efficient business is calculating their gross profit per man hour, right? But per erg. And we're not doing that. And so then trying to calculate real world fees, we're paying real world dollars on sort of imaginary expenses right now, in a way, because we don't know, or at least we're not shown, it's not transparent anyway, what those real fees are and what percentage then is being covered. Because obviously this isn't 100%. But if people are going to have pushback, and we don't have real data from which to offer back to be like, well, this is actually like 12% of what we spend per whatever it might be, or it's 80%.
We do have that. We understand what the costs are, right? It's $36,000 to do maintenance of the fields. It's $12,000 for irrigation, $7,600 for the restroom building, $1,200 for the administrative. We have it all broken out, right?
And I think that's what's not, that's the missing link behind this, because it is contentious. The transparency, that I knew you had it, but it's not here, and it's not evident when we're having these conversations. And when we're going to have the pushback, I think it's, again, better to not offer when asked. At this point, it's better to bring it to the table so it's clear to the vested parties why this action is necessary and what it's truly costing, so that they can understand, and we can get to an even, we can be in agreement of the cost here, so we can understand at the table then how do we come to a reasonable price that's going to work for everybody. That's going to treat it a little bit more like a partnership, and it's going to bring down, I think, some of the defensiveness that's going to come around from the long-standing stakeholders that have had agreements, a lot of them handshake, over the years, that they've been working from and planning from and building their strategies around.
I guess I'm not convinced that recovery costs should be the main driver. If you look at the Little League fields, And we just put how much money into the Little League fields? Couple,
Have about 600,000.
600,000. Are we going to pass that on to the Little League players? No. Is that recovery cost?
Some of it, yeah.
Huh?
Some of it.
Yeah. I mean, we have capital costs that are not operating costs, but they're costs to the city nonetheless. And so we take a football field that's grass, and we make it artificial turf, and that costs us a few $1 million. Is the expectation that the football organization is going to continue paying the same? Because, I mean, if we're looking at recovery costs, we're going to have to charge them a lot more. So the recovery cost, this is really an interesting conversation. We probably could go on all afternoon. I guess I'm just trying to draw it back to make it less complicated and to make it, I'm not saying this is the way to do it, but negotiate it like Eric said. That's what's a reasonable cost to charge football for using these football fields for this period of time, without getting to, well, this guy, it took him an hour and a half, not an hour, to clean the restrooms, or 3 hours to line the field. Maybe that's way off base. I don't know. I'm just jabbering right now, but
Well, but that was a lot of our conversation when we sat down with the committees, right? We had that exact discussion when we were looking at this is, okay, what should those fees be based off of? Right now, it's just a very arbitrary per player amount, right? So we went through all the exercises, really understanding the nitty gritty down to the weeds of what are our costs? What is it costing us to do each activity? What's the total support of this? Okay, we understand that. All right, what are we charging? Okay, so that's basically a 7% cost recovery. Well, do we have a goal we're trying to get to? That was the main thing around cost recovery is, all right, well, is there a percentage that we really want to get back? We realize that needs to only be a factor, right? One consideration factor. And it's almost more of a, well, this is an interesting, talking point, really. The other part of it was looking at the market, right? So we did comparables, other municipalities. Okay, if you were to go to, another city to rent fields or do a program, what would those costs be? And we collected about a dozen or so of those. And where are we falling within that? We saw, okay, we are extremely low compared to most of them. And we also don't charge in the same methodology that they are. So this really is just kind of a first step of mostly just changing how we are assessing fees. I think there's still work to be done of understanding, okay, we want to be comparable within the market, not too high, not too low, but we also want to understand, is there a financial goal for the city? What should the community as a whole bear through tax subsidy, and what should the programs or the businesses that are running these things, bear through user fees? That has not been given to us by council. We haven't given them a recommendation yet through a cost recovery model or a Parks and Rec master plan yet. But those are all things that kind of go into consideration, right? And we've had these discussions through the committees, and we're just trying to move towards that direction. I would hope within the next, 1 or 2 budget cycles that we have a very clear defined, this is the right amount of tax subsidy versus use fee subsidy. This is where we want to be cost recovery wise, and this is where we want to be competitively within the marketplace. And all those are very clear. We're just kind of moving in the right direction right now.
well, I would agree that there should be some standard, some metric to help you operate your budget to what is required by the city. You don't have that now. So it's almost like just get back whatever it costs you in addition to, to normal daily use of these facilities. So get what you can get. I mean, is that where we are? Or get only what it's costing you. But does that include improvements? No. So I don't know. I don't know where it lands, but I think there should be some metrics, some standards that says you're expected to operate parks at a 10% self-sufficiency. So you have to get $1 in for every 10 that you spend to meet your metric. That's oversimplified, I know. But anyway, I don't want to draw it out any longer.
And The other consideration I'd say, just also in closing that I didn't add was, there is a history, right? There is been a established set point that these programs have set their own budgets on. That's also a consideration. We're not just dismissing all that. Every single one of the leagues have expressed, concerns with increases in fees. Totally understandable. I absolutely feel that and understand that. Marina is exactly the same, although they're much more emotional about it. Yes, fee increases are painful. We have cost increases every single year. It's been a long time since we have adjusted to those, and having to move that bar is painful. I do not want leagues to go other places. This should be for the public good, and these programs are for youth, and we want them to continue, and that's why we do subsidize them at such a high rate right now. But it is important that we work with them. I don't want to just simply dictate, okay, here's the fee, swallow it or go somewhere else. We do want to be sensitive to that. We will have sit-down discussions with them, and we also have league agreements, right? And if absolutely necessary, we can make overriding adjustments in those agreements compared to what's in the fee schedule for general fee information.
Well, as you mentioned, Marina is an enterprise fund, so they have control over revenue and expense, so that they operate to a bottom line. The rest of your department doesn't operate to a bottom line. So it makes it easier and harder at the same time.
Yeah, they definitely have a very clear revenue projection that they have to meet, and fees have to adjust with expenses to meet that. And yeah, and that is very painful sometimes.
So I'm hearing three things. Number one, my understanding is city staff is getting the request from the administration to recover costs. Have they given you a percentage of cost recovery that they're expecting or not?
More at a very high level, not so much within, individual program operations.
Okay.
We are moving to what's called a program performance budget. It's very different from how the city has operated previously, and we're all still wrapping our heads around how that's going to work. But there will be a lot more information and reporting in how we are doing performance-wise as far as participation, number of rentals, revenues, things like that.
Okay. Secondly, I'm hearing that there's just a disproportionate increase for some leagues versus others. Is there a way to calculate that out and make it more fair or more equitable amongst the different types of leagues?
I think part of that is some leagues need to adjust more from where they've been historically to where they should be at, right? We haven't, using the model that we were using before, it's pretty skewed because it's based off players and not amount of usage. So to bring that all into a little more equitable methodology in charging is, there's going to be disproportionate adjustments because of number of players to the programs compared to how much they use the field or what our costs are for maintaining a field.
Okay, and then with that, then can we get those numbers of what it is costing us and present that to each league so they can see this is why football is being charged more than, baseball or soccer or whatever, so that there's a little bit clearer understanding on both sides as to why the costs are what they are or what's being proposed, why that is.
Yeah, and that was asked pretty early on in the process. So like I said, we went through the exercise of understanding all those costs and having that mapped out. But again, that's really only one factor because we don't necessarily have a percentage of, okay, we want to, right now it's 17% cost recovery. We want to have a 25% cost recovery. We haven't set that number or are setting fees compared to what that number is. It's more of a talking point than a guide for what the fee should be. But we have those and we can walk through that with them.
Okay, would that be helpful to football or in general leagues to understand the cost recovery model and to understand the fee increases?
Yeah, it would be helpful to have that information. I will say that it was commented that the reason baseball is higher than softball is because of the field usage, or because of the field improvements, right? But if we're not actually going after cost recovery, which it doesn't sound like we are, when we're only charging $5 for pickleball or $15 for, it seems best to me that in order to make this as even as possible, is you just charge each youth organization an increase per player fee. That way, one organization is not absorbing more. If you have more players, which is ultimately is more impact on the fields, then you pay a little bit more than the other organizations that have fewer players. That seems like the easiest and fairest way to try to increase these fees, as opposed to charging different rates for different field uses, for different leagues. And so for me, that's, as a council member, that's what I'm going to support. I won't approve this. Let's just say it right now. This is too arbitrary for me. I don't see a disc golf league fee, right? Just a tournament fee. There's a disc golf league, correct?
No, not currently, there's not.
But there has been previously.
Previously, we haven't run a league since Hank, probably.
But if somebody wanted to run a league, there's no fee for that.
Well, the issue why is there's no leagues. Honestly, it was in deference to the other sports leagues who weren't respecting the league reservations, frankly. And so, as a choice for safety, we shut down our leagues, which were running midweek, because even though reservations had been paid, soccer, football, baseball continually were on those in the fairways and in places which was unsafe. And so we couldn't actually run our leagues. And I lost hundreds of dollars of money to the sanctioning organization because I couldn't turn in sanctioned events because we had broadcast 18 holes and paid for that. And then we're only free to play 12 of them because of unsanctioned other events that were crossing across it. And so we shut them down because my cost recovery model wasn't there.
Yeah.
So that's really why we don't do leagues anymore. We stick to our events at Fort Nugent, basically in the off seasons for football and soccer, because there's no mutuality there.
There was a tournament of some sort this year, because we moved for at least 2 days, we moved players to make sure that we had the cleared off space.
We ran 2 events this year, yeah. And we appreciate that. And that was the first time we've actually had support for those, and got back to some of that state. But in the future, that's why the leagues collapsed, and the, up to 6 events a year. It just haven't occurred there.
So the information we were provided is these are comparables, but we've heard firsthand from Eric that the cost of the tournament for disc golf is not comparable to other communities. And so what are the comparables that we've done? How are they the same for all across the board? I mean, again, we're only charging $5 for a court, but we're going to spend a ton of money on pickleball courts. I mean, we're nowhere near a cost recovery across the board.
These fees, though, are actually right in line with the city of Mount Vernon, city of Burlington, as far as the city fees. The higher fee were Skagit County, and some of those county-owned, but for much better facilities. So for comparable facility to facility, they're right in the ballpark there for this one. But for the better facilities, like which I was speaking to for Freedom Park, which will be a much better facility in the future, then yeah, those higher fees I think will play. But we'll have to figure out the parking situation and a bunch of other stuff that won't be developed there that some of these other courses have. And we can get into the weeds on that.
And we're going from a
later.
0% cost recovery to that, right, to a cost recovery. I mean, it's, and then we're going to have to, there's price elasticity. We're going to have to judge, how does charging something that has always been free affect the usage, and adjust to that also, which is also a factor.
I think my final sort of comment, I think it is anyway, on this is that, one, I think y'all have done a great job over there trying to do something that's going to be just a thankless, miserable task. Nobody's going to be happy about what you're doing, and I think trying to put something down to have a discussion around has been really great, honestly, because we had no place from which to start, really. We had these other agreements, but it wasn't checking all the boxes, and I think you should be applauded for that. I think we need to take that loophole that we have with the leagues to have some negotiation in the in-between But I think something like this may need to be the way in which we go. I'll leave that up to the wisdom of the council to decide how they vote. But I think in the in-between time, till we get to a real hard vision of what we're trying to accomplish with a cost recovery, putting something like this in and then having negotiation with the leagues in the meantime so that they can adjust would be important. I think the last thing I want to say, and one of the things that makes this so complicated, is how we have allowed for these like league-owned amenities to be on, the parkland, whether it's, cargo containers or scoreboards or some of this stuff. It worked when we put it in because the understanding was there, but now we're trying to figure out how do we navigate it in this new world that we're creating, and it causes pain. There's pain there. It's going to create necessary resentment because things were brought in with an understanding of thousands of dollars of money was spent and cost was incurred in order to do something, and now we're in a situation where we've got these private things sitting on, public parkland, and they're very utilitarian, like the Connex boxes, but they're horrible as far as like aesthetics and stuff. Does that mean they should go? Does that mean they should stay? I don't know. But we put ourselves in a situation there where I think we need to revisit that whole idea and find out how we're going to do that in the future and what would be the requirements for those things. Or is that something the city should provide in order to better resource the leagues in which you're paying? Should we figure out a better way to do it? And I would recommend so it doesn't look like a port. But again, I think that's a conversation that we need to have, and we need to standardize that. If we can't put gravel parking lots in parkland, or we can't figure out a good way to use that overflow parking that we have at the center, then what can we do about cargo boxes? We have arbitrary rules for things along the way, but we don't have it all sounded out, at least as far as I understand, and we need to do that so that we don't get situations when agreements need to change that create resentment, that create division, and create friction in a working relationship that I think would benefit from having as little as possible for the good of the community, the kids that are going to play, and the families that support it.
Do we have anyone else that has any final comments? Do you need anything from us, a recommendation or anything on this right now, or?
Since this is going to council next week, it would be great to have a motion, a recommendation to council, or a motion of, we'd like to see these changes incorporated in.
Do we have a specific?
I think there's a couple of ways you can go about this. One would be you could forward this and knowing, if nothing else, it's going to start discussion or create discussion at the council level. Or I think possibly you go to the council and say, give us some direction. What's the expectation for the Parks and Recreation Department for revenue generation? Those are just two possibilities.
Yeah, I think that's where the disconnect is that there's a focus on cost recovery, but there is no bar set for what that cost recovery should be. And so we're just trying to recover as much as we can, and then that creates, this unequal balance of what prices have to be raised. So it'd be nice if there was a little more guidance from the administration on what they want to see in terms of cost recovery.
And we asked that, we've had a few workshops where asked very point blank, please tell us what you would like to see in cost recovery. We gave them, for instance, with the discussion about stating, this is the cost for the city to close the road. What would you like us to be charging for that? I have a number of comments that you guys have made, coming on numbers, and looking at parallel versus things like that. What to get official, please look at this and make an adjustment to go back to us.
I think if I was to make a motion, I think the motion that I would be interested in making would be adopting a use model over a player fee model, because that's really the revolutionary shift here, right? The big change is that we're going from while allowing for some negotiation, you know, with the leagues in order to adjust as this model changes. And then, if that passes, then handing it back to staff to revise the pricing completely, knowing that we have a guideline here. And if city council says, yeah, let's go with this model, you know, then we send it back and finalize the pricing. But I think that's the motion that I would make, is switching from a per player model to a use model, if we're going to make a motion. I think that's the clear piece there, and we can worry about cost recovery later once we have an exact or a clearer directive.
Which is what we've done in the design council workshop. And this is the methodology where these colleges, almost all of these colleges charge.
So during your workshops, council was in agreement with the model that you've presented them. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
there weren't any motions made,
Okay.
workshops, we just got feedback and generally they were.
Okay.
So the issue I have with being able to negotiate is it makes it arbitrary. Now, one league could get a different rate than another league. You could do something different, and that becomes a case-by-case scenario where these adopted fee schedules are to be intended to be, these are the fees. You know, as a per hour fee, that could vary depending on how many home games you have, right? Because this is all based upon games, correct? Not based upon practices, but simply on games. So that could change based upon the number of home games you have. What you have when you have a per player fee, you know what your fee is going to be, and therefore you know what you can charge per kid. And so I don't like the idea of being able to negotiate, because then it becomes arbitrary and it becomes a case by case, which is not fair to everybody. And then two, being able to have it per player as opposed per hour, you know what your fees are going to be, and so you can charge accordingly.
Yeah, and I guess that's why I'm saying if we were going to, and not even necessarily make a motion for it, but that's the thing we need to figure out. Are we going to do per use, or are we going to do per player? And I think why I'm suggesting a negotiable, my thought would be it would be just for 2025, because we're so late in the year on 2024.
Hey, Carrie.
And that we would then, you know, have just a 1-year negotiation with all the leagues, rather than, you know, individual side room deals with each one of the individual leagues to accomplish what are we going to do in this year, and then put the pressure on leadership in order to actually come up with a real model with a real number that we can really get attached to if we're going to switch. Well, either way, we need to have the real model of what the goal is, but that's more of what I was suggesting, only for 2025, to somehow bridge this gap if going in this direction. If not, then I'm not sure if that's necessary. But I feel like it's unfair to ask the long-term partners to not be able to have further conversation about how to handle it, and also have some more opportunity to get clarity, because there were some miscalculations from like the soccer folks about how fields were being used, where it was, you know, basically it was zones of acreage rather than actual setup fields, in that, in order to get to a place where everybody feels like it's moving forward in a usable way. And if not, allowing, you know, leagues like football to decide where they want to go. If they would rather, you know, if they would rather use the school district fields in the stadium, you know, but at least having some clarity in order to be able to make those decisions as well.
Yeah,
That's where I was trying to get to.
I think negotiations might not be the right word. It seems like more like conversations for clarity would be the word, because you're not going back and forth about, you know, how much they want to pay versus how much we want to charge. It just seems like more of a conversation for clarity.
Well, I think if we're switching the model to a per use, then I think we owe it to the long-term youth sports that have been good on making all of their payments throughout the years and have not been, you know, negligent or derelict in their financial duties and responsibilities, to be able to have a voice to say, look, what we can do right now in swing is going to be at this, and being able to actually maybe set a temporary price that's not this standard, just to get us through until we have real numbers from, you know, the powers that be, with a real clear directive for a number.
Okay. Craig, did you have a comment?
Just one thing, I just wanted to provide a little bit of clarity on it, just make sure that it is part of the conversation, is a big part of us wanting to move from the per participant over to a per usage situation is kind of what Eric touched on upon. In the past, if we had multiple leagues that were going on at the same time, I mean, Eric, you had to cancel your league because there was no other decision. We're trying to get more information along the process, and not including any information about what fees are decided, but just that process. Now we have a little bit more information. We know this league is here. So when you're asking to do another conflicting program, we would say, oh, well, you know, this league is here, they have that, and that kind of, you know, adds into what extra are you getting. You're getting a little bit more knowledge on our part so we can provide a little bit more appropriate service to make sure that the leagues do have better situations where they're out there, they're not having a league that's trying to fight over the same thing that they're trying to use, and what they're paying for is theirs exclusively. So that would be a big benefit of switching from the per participant over to the per, you know, for usage. And that if you don't make that switch, then we would have to come up with another idea on how to go that direction. And I just wanted to make sure that information was there.
So, I guess, is the recommendation needed, do you want us to recommend what type of model you're gonna present to council? Because it sounds like that conversation has already been had with council. And they've already decided that this is what they wanna go with, the model.
This is what staff presented. We got feedback. There wasn't a, like I said, these were workshops, so there hasn't been
Right.
a decision or a approval of anything.
Right,
This
but,
goes back to council, and I believe we're looking for adoption, right, in this meeting? On the 17th, right. So what you have in your packet is what we're presenting to them. Any changes to that is what we're looking for from you. So we're kind of past I mean, we've been meeting with you guys in subcommittees and have gone to council and workshop a couple times already with this. So we're kind of past the methodology and how we're going to assess fees. This is what we're looking for. Right now, we're just trying to, are there any last minute fine tuning as we've gone along? Like the rounding the numbers that.
I think you might be
that
finding
makes
us a little
sense.
bit gun shy after some other staff recommendations based on some changes to parks that left us a little exposed by a recommendation that we were asked to give, and then the ensuing political storm that occurred around it, and some changes and information that happened that we weren't privy to when we were made our first recommendations. So if you find myself gun shy, I think that's part of the reason. And I don't think, I mean, maybe I'm speaking for just myself, but I think there is some pause with that. So I need another few minutes to collect myself before I think about making a recommendation.
the only recommendation I think we can all agree on is rounding the, to the whole dollar. So it's not $29.38, it's $30 or whatever. I think that's the only thing we've all agreed on in terms of a recommendation.
Mikhail, is there anything requiring approval of the fee schedule by a certain date? No? So, another option or way to go is to recommend to council that, hey, we still want to massage this a little bit. And here's what we're thinking, let's present it. Even though we're asking for a Yeah, so if your recommendation was to, let's keep working on this, because we still are coming back at a later date with the land use fees, and so there are some other departments that are still working on adjusting the fee schedule, so if you want to keep working on it a little longer, that could be your recommendation as well.
Yeah, I think, in my opinion, that would be the way to go, just because based on feedback, I mean, before I recommend to council that they should approve this, I would like to get feedback, like today it was very helpful to get feedback on the leagues. We haven't had those in-person people in our subcommittee meetings to give us any feedback. So for me to say, okay, without any feedback personally from anyone else involved in, impacted by this, I'm not comfortable recommending that we have them approve this yet, but I think there's room for adjustments if we have the time.
Can we make a motion that would approve this, as the structure almost, while, and then setting a deadline for actually finalizing the details? Because, the finalizing the actual pricing, does city council need to vote on the actual pricing?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
they'll approve
we'd be
a
pushed
document
out
that
then
has-
till we could, have the deadline be for the January meeting and then the pricing, but, I think the structure is sound. I just think there's some pricing changes that need.
I guarantee you're not going to come to a place where everyone is happy and
No.
everyone agrees, right? Look at
Don't
the
expect
marina fee increases. The council actually had to go against the recommendation of the Marina Advisory Commission, who all were felt very strongly about fighting against fee increases. So, there's a balance there. Okay, we have a mandate to raise revenues, we have a mandate to be sensitive and not negatively impact the services that we're trying to provide, right? And sometimes they're a little bit in conflict, so you got to find a, if not happy, acceptable, middle ground, right?
Yeah, I think that you're never going to make everybody happy, but as an advisory commission, we need to have more feedback, I feel like, to have an informed opinion on what we can recommend. That is our job as advisory, commissioners. So I don't know what conversations have been had with staff amongst, with other leagues and things like that, but we haven't had any of that information about what the feedback has been from leagues other than today. So that's where I'm at right now.
Tom and I have had an opportunity, I think, to look a little bit further in this in our subcommittee, and so I'm knowing that we can have another 30 days or so, I think, to finalize pricing. I like the overall structure of this. I think it makes sense in a lot of ways. I think it makes it easier for a lot of things, but I think we need to dial in some of the pricing, whether that's to knock off the additional cents here and there, or to reconsider some of the line items. So I don't know if there's a motion. I'm not sure how to make, or how I would make a motion to say, like, let's approve this in structure, but then also know that staff has come back with finalized pricing for approval. And I don't know if we can get, or if we need to approve all the parts in some at once, and otherwise we're wasting the council's time.
Yeah, I think you could do whatever you want, right? The motion could
There's a
definitely
motion
be,
and a useful
hey,
motion.
We like the methodology for assessing fees. Our recommendation to council would be allow staff additional time to meet with the leagues one more time. Mostly we've been doing emails, so we haven't had like a sit down with them and, hey, here's the fee schedule, let's have a conversation, and let's give you some boxing gloves and we'll stand here and let you take the shots for a little bit and then we'll respond. But the holidays, it might be a little tricky, but we can definitely try and set up sit-down meetings with the leagues to go over it, and meet in the committees after we meet with them, have a little more discussion, and then come back as a commission to say, hey, we feel good about where we're at here or not, and here's our recommendation to council to adopt or to not adopt. And regardless, council will have their own discussions and own questions and concerns and make a motion based off of majority, so.
Well, then the motion, I'd like to make a motion then that we extend this out for another, until the next meeting, in order to allow staff to finalize some of the pricing and address these concerns, as well as meet with the stakeholders to come to a reasonable working agreement.
Do we have a second?
I second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so that motion passes.
Do you need anything, Mikhail, as far as that goes? Are you presenting it, or is David? Together? Okay. Okay.
We're good? Okay.
So clarifying question, is that just for the field fees or the full department's fee schedule?
Well, I think I would like to include the center in that as well, so I think we'd have the whole thing under purview as needed.
No, facility fees,
Yeah.
not program fees, right? Facility
No,
fees.
not program fees.
No, facility fees.
Special events?
Yeah, facilities and special events. I think that's fair. We had questions about all of that, from road closures and costs and to all of that, so that's all special events,
Are you
field
looking
usage.
for portions to put forward?
Yeah, because it is going forward, so I just want that to know what that comes from.
But we know we're also going, I mean, part of that, making as vague as I was, is because we know we want to revisit the pricing on the stuff that's got 13 cents and 68 cents on it. So I was leaving it intentionally vague in the motion because we're going to need to reconsider all of those parts in order to knock off the weird pricing or round up and round down to make it more readable and accessible. So I was vague intentionally in order to allow the exploration of all the sections for those very concerns, because I didn't want anything to get checked as okay when we said, no, we don't want 32 cents on the line item.
Do you have any other feedback or concerns, or want to include recreation programs in the conditional considerations, or would you like to go ahead and recommend that go forward to council for adoption? The recreation programs section, I don't know, we didn't have a chapter.
I would want to just take a look at everything, because if we're able to make adjustments across the board, we might have to pull from here and put there and move here and move there. So I think that approving one thing and not the other things might leave us a place where we can have some wiggle room, so to speak. So I would like to leave it to where we can just view everything as an entirety.
So are you referring to the program, the fees for programs like
Yeah,
that
the
are?
section recreation programs.
Chances are we'll probably go ahead and approve those as is, but I think we need to keep it as general as possible now to keep our discussions open.
I mean, yeah, we're talking about like 12 lines. I don't think matters one way or the other. It's not like we're talking about a massive amount of items either way.
So is that good? Yeah, okay. Okay, let's move on to activity guide and program schedule.
All right, we'll have Craig present this.
So yeah, in here you have our activity guide, and this is the information that's going to be coming out in our winter activity guide as far as programming goes. We wanted to include it for everybody to see, just anybody wanted to provide feedback, take a look at it, just have an extra set of eyes, and just see the direction that we are going. In addition to the classes that we've had in the past, we're also starting up, getting into our leagues, and you'll see that just some general league information and the direction we're going with that. And just some extra programming that we're going to head forward with, and you know, give a good idea. And again, would love feedback on that. And then also we have on the very back you have a calendar, which actually I brought a little bit bigger. I'm gonna bring over here to pass out. And what you'll see here is basically a 2025 timeline of what we're expecting programming-wise, including some registration dates and the leagues that we're planning on getting in. We don't have specific leagues as far as exactly what we're doing each season. That we're going to take it season by season and just see what the community wants, what sort of feedback we can get as we grow. But as you can see, everything is planned out, including, you can see our summer camp registration, our summer camp programs, and we got a little bit of detail, even when we do like a sports program, we want to have it done properly. So it would start out with a coaches meeting, go into our evaluation, leave a week pretty much blank, so we have the ability to divide up the teams as evenly as possible. And then after that, they get right into their practicing, and from there, we'll have our opening day, go all the way to the end of the season, and then finish up with a end of season awards banquet. So get all the teams out, be able to pass out trophies, and just have a nice fun closure for the league. And then our summer camp, those are tied along with the school schedules, so we should be operating the 10 weeks that the school district is out. Be able to provide our recreational programming year-round now.
I just had a couple of comments looking through the activity guide, how it's laid out. For the 50-plus programming, a couple things. Right below 50-plus programming, could there be an explanation of what the member rate means versus the non-member rate and how you can become a member? Because it's a little bit confusing when people are just flipping through, like, oh, what does this mean, fee? And it just says fee on the column for most of them. And then with that, on the member rate, or the fee column, I guess, the first couple, the non-member rate is first and the member rate is second, and then the rest, it's flipped. So if they could all be consistent, that would probably be easier to read. Also, each program, right below the name of the program, has an age range, so like 18 plus, 1 to 5, whatever. Under each 50-plus program, could we also put 50-plus, like the age range, just because if you're just flipping through and you're not paying attention to, I'm under the 50-plus category, and I'm looking at yoga, you know, that would be relevant information to have. I think that's all I had. Oh, for the ones that are free, are those open to only members, or are they open to everybody? Because some of them just have one thing listed in the fee column and it's free, and so it's like, is that a member thing or a non-member? Are they welcome? And that's all I had.
Great, thank you for the feedback.
Good feedback. Any other feedback, questions, comments?
Did anyone have any questions or comments?
I just want to say I think it's great. I like how you're opening it up, exploring some more options, and trying to not do repetitive things, you know, things that aren't already being offered, and that's fantastic. So I think it's exciting, and I hope it builds really good momentum for you all, because this is, yeah, there's a lot to be excited about here. Thanks, Greg.
Oh, Carrie, to answer your question, where it says free, that's free for everyone. If there's a member free versus a non-member rate, like if you look down, you know, like some of the games, you know, it'll say free, or there's a non-member rate for that.
Right, I'm just looking at like social dance, for example. There's, under fee, it just is free all the way down, but it's unclear, do I have to be a member to attend that, or can I show up if I'm not a member? If I were 50 years old. Any other questions or comments? Okay, since we're talking about the, oh, sure, just one more thing.
Yeah.
Since we're talking about the activity guide, Liz requested that we write up a little paragraph for the activity guide again. So I'm happy to write that up. I need to get it to her today, but if anyone has anything they'd like to include in it, please let me know. And that's all I got. So Eric, you can go ahead.
Is there a fee for the CPR class? I didn't see.
No, that one is free.
That one's free?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a quick question, and this goes back to the fees as well with the recreation program. So it says 50-plus program membership. So does that mean you have to be 50 or over to become a member?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
That's why I think an explanation under the 50-plus programs about what member versus non-member means and how you can become a member would be helpful, because it's not really clear.
It's not very clear, and I know that people have come to me and said, oh, I didn't know I could do these programs because I'm not 50. So some of the programs, like the line dancing or whatever, it's, you know, they just think that you have to be, because it's at the center, you have to be of a certain age to be able to do any of the programs. And it needs to be very clear that that's not the case.
And if it is a program for only 50-plus, that's why I think under each class to have the age 50-plus, if that's what it is. Any other comments, suggestions, questions?
Okay, good feedback, thank you.
All right. Next item is subcommittee updates. Who wants to go first?
We can go first as far as facilities. We already basically covered it all, talking about, rates, essentially. Adjacent to that, the disc golf course designer was out here last week and got a lot of work done as far as the disc golf course and the trail network. And so now we're moving to, I think, the next stages with that is getting some labor out there to start cutting the stuff in so we can begin the process of activating the park for the community. So that's exciting.
Okay, Programs and Events Committee. We mainly went over this programming in the activity guide programs. And then we also discussed a rugby program, upcoming rugby program, and how we're collaborating with the football league for that. It was just kind of informational for us, I guess. Stefania, did you have anything to add?
I just wanted to add again that the programs that are in the program guide are fantastic programs. They're kind of out of the box and just a lot of variety. There's even some that take you through different cultural activities, which is really cool. I'm trying not to say dope as much. I'm growing as a person. But it's really dope. So I think that all the work that's been put into it has been phenomenal. I know that it's not easy to come up with these things or staff these things. And rugby, I just want to shout it from the mountaintops. And that's all I have to say.
Okay, so then our did you need to go? Okay. Playgrounds and Parks and Playgrounds Subcommittee. We went over the budget of what is in the budget going forward for the next couple of years. We also discussed the Lagoon Dock project and some hiccups we've had with that. I don't know if Brian wants to speak to that a little bit or not.
Yeah, I can. So we had a T-Mobile grant back in 2020 for $50,000. We purchased the dock to replace the dock at the lagoon. The project had not gone forward, but we had spent the grant money. So we evaluated that as we evaluated all the in-process projects, and there were a couple of very concerning things. One is that we really didn't want to replace a piered dock with a less robust floating dock that would have to be removed seasonally. There's also a little bit of liability concern with a floating dock and entrapment under the dock. We found ourselves in a kind of a no-win situation where we can't return the grant because we already spent the money, but we can't do the project. So what do? We are looking at going ahead and installing the dock seasonally. We're still checking on liability around that and any safety concerns with dark water. The current dock we had evaluated, the pilings are fine. We can continue to do maintenance on the top to keep the useful life of it going for several years. But there's also a lot of comments from council when we brought this up earlier this year about other improvements they'd like to see around the lagoon. Accessibility to the water, looking at ramps or seating around the lagoon as well, different things like that. So we're working on a plan for those improvements and how we can effectively do those. The agreement with Evans Marine Solution was kind of interesting. They had $7,000 for removal and installation, which is very suspicious to me. I don't think they could remove that existing dock for $7,000, let alone do everything else to install a new one and connect it with a pathway. But we'll have to work through that with them. But right now, that is the plan, to go ahead and accept that dock and use it seasonally, as long as that's not going to be an issue safety-wise or anything like that.
Did you have anything to add, Vicki? Okay, about our subcommittee at all?
The only other thing that I would say that we brought up was with the playground, trying to maybe get some participation from the military to help cover the costs of the playground, of the new playground down at Windjammer.
Yep. Okay, anything else from anybody? All right, let's go ahead and move on to Parks and Recreation Director updates.
All right. We're already over time, so I'll be pretty brief and go through these quickly. We have 90% plan designs for the pickleball courts. We were going to have Don come and present those. He wasn't able to last minute, but he did send us the plans, so I'll just forward those on to you. You can look through. We wouldn't have had time to do it anyway, so we'll probably have that as a future presentation to walk through it. So look through the plans, and by the next meeting, if you have any questions or comments, be ready with those. Have been talking with Brian Tyhouse with the Navy on cooperation on several park projects. He is very interested in participating with the Recreation Center and has some great suggestions for the community cooperation, local defense community cooperation program, or the State Department of Commerce Defense Community compatibility account for assistance in funding a recreation center, which was really interesting. So he's now on our rec center feasibility study committee. We did get word from the state that we cannot break off the $35,000 for an art center study. So we are going to just go ahead and move forward with the full amount for the rec center feasibility study. We're just waiting on the agreement to get signed, and then we can send on the RFP. We have a committee we put together that reviewed the scope before. I'll probably pull them together here pretty soon just to go over the RFP draft and see if there's any changes that they would like to include from the last time we met before that goes out. As soon as we get that agreement back, then I can send that out. So that's where we are with that. We had the Washington Conservation Corps scheduled for this week to do cleanup around Windjammer Park, to clean up creosote logs off from the beach. So you'll see them out and about doing that. We're also working on a shoreline restoration project in partnership with Public Works, who will be doing restoration of that rock seawall area along the Bayshore Drive. Let's see here. And the other thing we're looking at is allocating out money for renovation of Volunteer Park. That'll have to be a partnership with the school district, but those softball fields have long needed some real love and overhaul. We put quite a bit of money into renovation of the baseball field, so that's our focus for sports field renovations with this Department of Economic Development grant funding. Yeah, that's it.
Any questions about that? Okay, we'll move on to member comments. Does anyone have any comments? Okay, I have two. Both are kind of in regards to the public comment that we received. First of all, Flintstone Park, to be clear, what we approved, was that the original plan to begin with for that park when they decided on placement of the statue?
We had I don't know if you call it an original plan, but and we came in pretty late into this Angel of Creativity project. I mean, everything was already done. The location was selected, we just put it across the finish line. But the group that had selected where that statue placement would be, I think the idea originally was to close off the road there. And so you could come into the parking lot and we would just kind of widen that out. I think that was the original thought. And then as we've had further discussion with the commissions, we had a number of different options. And the option of removing the roundabout entirely and just expanding the upper parking lot was the one that was selected.
I just wanted to clarify that. And the plan was always to remove the roundabout, though,
Yes.
from my understanding. Okay. Will that be presented again to city council, or is that just in the works now?
That's in works now. We didn't bring them to them for I'll have to think back. I think it was a workshop. I don't know if they passed an actual motion or not. But we presented the options to them in the workshop, got their feedback, and pretty much had a head nod on that direction that you guys recommended to them. We also asked them, do you want us to keep the lower parking lot closed or open it back up, and people will just have to kind of drive on the grass if they need to pass cars? They suggested that we keep it closed. So that's what we've been doing until we get that park renovated.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. And then in terms of, well, I met with a couple community members and we discussed how they would like to get information from us. And the public comment also mentions the change in meeting time. I let them know that there's the notify me button on the website so they can get automatic emails, but they weren't aware of that, and I don't know how many people are aware of that. Is that something that we could put maybe in the activity guide, that information, and maybe even like a Facebook post, letting people know how to do that? And would it be okay to put a Facebook post on the Parks and Rec page of upcoming meetings, like our December meeting is, whatever day, at this time, at this location, a week ahead of time or whatever, so that people are aware of it in multiple ways?
Yeah, absolutely. And
Okay.
and with the improvements to the website, we can also include that
Sure.
to make it a little easier to find or provide comments.
Okay.
We're also working with Maggie with the website improvements on the project page and having current ongoing projects have a lot of good information and post like if there's any public comments on those projects and things like that.
Okay, great. All right, any other comments, questions? Okay. Determination of future agenda items. Do we have anything at this point? Maybe revisit the website? And the fee, well, yeah. So the fee structure and the website are the two that we've got. Anything else?
I don't know if this has to do with Park and Rec, so you can point me in the right direction. Maybe have another conversation as far as scholarships go and maybe sponsorships of youth sports, if we're able to do that.
Yeah, and we can discuss that in our subcommittee as well, but yeah, we can talk about that.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll include that in one of our subcommittee meetings and can work on that a little bit and then bring that to commission.
This probably isn't an imminent for next time, but I think on the horizon, a conversation about the Adopt a Park program would be a really good thing to do.
Okay, anything else? Last call? All right,